Moses was not the first to put together a set of laws for his people in order that they might obey, that they might be prosperous, that there might be order and contentment in the midst of leading his people. An earlier version comes out of Old Babylon, and it is the Law Code of Hammurabi. It is Hammurabi's desire to plant justice and order in his kingdom. When we think about what Hammurabi did, he put an 8-foot stone with his laws carved around the stone. We'll see a picture of it in a minute. And at the top is the sun god giving Hammurabi the laws. The role of that stela was whenever anybody walked by, they knew Hammurabi was in charge and these were the things that he required. So the idea of a published stela is nobody could say, I am ignorant of the laws of this land. They are published. They are here for the reader to look. It also teaches us that Hammurabi was the lawgiver. He's the one who is writing down the laws. And so he will pursue, you might say, his own glory. And you could say that that's a little bit prideful. But it's also true that if you're going to hold the people together by law and you are the source of that law, then they had better learn to respect you if they're ever going to learn to respect that law. So Hammurabi puts together his law during the final years of his tenure as king. He, probably a mediocre king, all said, but he does want permanent order and justice for his family. And this law code was actually found in published form in Persia, which means that it had migrated, that it had been found of value to surrounding cultures as well. So this is the Law Code of Hammurabi. When you read it, Hammurabi displays the fact that he himself will be the source of justice for his code. He calls himself the salvation-bringing shepherd at one point. He says, I put law and justice into the mouth of the people. I rule and give light to the land. And these are the just rules which Hammurabi, the wise king, has established. So you can see that he's basing the law on his own wisdom. And so it is good, but it is limited by that because Hammurabi himself is limited in his own wisdom. And he also wants that wisdom to be respected. So he may be trying to make a name for himself, but if his wisdom is not respected, if the law is not respected, you can see that people won't obey, and that will lead to civil unrest, and that's a problem. So you can see some of his limitations are his own wisdom, or the respect that others would give that wisdom, or even his power. If there is no respect, what power does he have to actually enforce the laws? So in a sense, he sees himself as the source of justice, but because he is only a man, there are limitations to what he can do. His law code has 2 levels to it, a level for nobility and a level for the slave. So if you do a thing that crosses his law, if you are a nobility, there will be one kind of punishment. If you are a slave, there will be another kind of punishment. So there are almost 2 levels of justice, which is a problem, but it does tell us very early in the world, we looked upon ourselves, some of us as an intellectual class, as the movers and shakers of the world, and then there are those plebes, those other people, and we were willing to enslave each other from a very early time. It's a sad commentary. But you can see that in Hammurabi's code, there is 2 levels of justice, one for the nobility and the other for the commoner or for the slave. You don't find much of what you might find in Moses' writings. You don't find much what's called apodictic law. Apodictic law. This is the kind of law that applies to everyone at all times. It is a summary command like "Thou shalt not kill." Applies to everybody at all times. There might be a general principle that there could be exceptions, but those will have to be worked out in court. There is this principle that applies to everyone at all times. And it's interesting, it's Moses that comes up with that kind of law, that the thou shalt not kill type of law is rare outside of Israel. I wonder if it's because there's a two-tier caste system that law develops along two fronts, and so there wouldn't be a law that applied to everybody equally because the people themselves are not equal. By the way, the picture at the bottom is a picture of the sun god on the right, handing his inspiration, his wisdom, his knowledge to Hammurabi in the writing of the Law Code of Hammurabi. It's a picture that's at the top of that stela, as we'll talk. Here's the stela. There's the picture. There's the law code written underneath, that everybody who passes by this 8-foot stone can read the law for themselves and know what Hammurabi requires in his land. So we said that there's not much of the law that universally applies to everybody. Thou shalt not kill, for example. But most of what we have from Hammurabi is case law. So if this is your situation, then here's what should be done. If this is true, then, right? But it only applies to you if you were in that situation. If you're not, don't worry about it. It doesn't have anything to do with you. This is the kind of law that was common for the ancient Near East. It's called case law. Now we'll take a look at sort of a comparison between what Hammurabi is writing about and what Moses put together in the Pentateuch. Hammurabi has case law only. We mentioned Moses has both. You'll find both as you read through places like Deuteronomy. Sometimes Hammurabi can seem a little bit extreme, like if a son strikes his father, his hands are cut off. But sometimes Scripture also, Moses' law, if a son rebels and it is his character to be rebellious, is to be put to death. So Hammurabi seems sometimes extreme, but the question is, how do we know how the punishment fits the crime, sort of thing? And by and large, I would say that the Mosaic Law better fits that template than some of the things that we read about in Hammurabi. We've already said that in Hammurabi, the source of justice is Hammurabi, and it's limited, if nothing else, by Hammurabi's mortality. How will his law fare once he is off the scene? A better Mosaic law does not depend on Moses. It is a written document between God and his people. And so Moses brings about the law, but it is from God, and his people are required to obey whether or not Moses is on the scene or not. Interesting thing about Moses' letters, sometimes in Deuteronomy, you will get a phrase, there's a phrase that occurs several times in which you are to treat the foreigner no differently than you are to treat a brother Jew. And so they're working on doing away with that two-level system, that two-caste system, that in Moses there is respect for citizen and foreigner alike. Now, similarities that you might find between Moses and Hammurabi, how would we explain similarities? There doesn't seem to be enough to really consider it borrowing one from the other. But I would say the similarities are the result of common grace. They're the result of a man's conscience. And so for Hammurabi and for Moses both, there is an ability to recognize what is good and what is not. But of course, Moses, because it is sourced in God, has a source of wisdom and power that is unknown to a Hammurabi. So that's the work of the Law Code of Hammurabi. I hope you enjoy reading some of it, and hope this introduction has been a help.